Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. In today's episode, well, we got to go into how to race Omloop het Nieuwsblad if you're one of the favorites. Now, when we look at the start of the Spring Classics starting tomorrow on Saturday, everything is going to start changing in the mentality of the riders. They have just got done doing a bunch of the one-day smaller races and some of the smaller stage races like the UAE Tour. It's a World Tour race, right? But not really. Who are we kidding? The World Tour races don't really start till we start getting up here at the Classics and then Paris-Nice and Trino Adriatico. If you want to go somewhere else other than Europe and call it a World Tour race, you're truly not a cycling fan, deep fan. Do I watch them? Of course I watch them because it sets up the precedent as we come in here to start the Classics in tomorrow's Saturday race. But if we're coming in to Omloop het Nieuwsblad, the biggest dilemma that the riders have is that there's the unknown factor. Nobody really knows exactly what's going to happen tomorrow because when you start looking at some of the favorites like Wout van Aert from Visma-Lease bike, the big guy, you know that he's focusing on Paris-Roubaix and Tour of Flanders as his #1 objective. But if you watched him race down at High End and if you watched him at Algarve, where he went second in the individual time trial on the last stage to Jonas Vingegaard after he did a bike change at the bottom of a 2.5 kilometer climb to the finish, maybe it cost him the win there, maybe it didn't. Maybe Jonas just went that fast. Maybe, though, Wout van Aert's form has started to progress after the one-day classic at High End, after 4 stages at Algarve, and then he was coming good on the 5th stage individual time trial, but he decided to change his bikes. But we don't know exactly for sure because he didn't win. One thing we do know for sure, though, is when all the riders get to Omloop, the crowds are going to increase massive in size, which means now the riders are going to start to feel the pressure and the excitement of the beginning of the 25 season starting tomorrow. So when we go in your Visma-Lease bike and you're looking at some of the strategies, if I'm the director sportif, I think, okay, Alpecin de Koenig have Jasper Philipsen, one of the greatest sprinters in the European peloton currently right now at this moment. So he's somebody you got to pay attention to, and that's a team that can help control the early part of the race. It's 200 kilometers, just under, we'll call it 197, and it has 10 bergs, and it has 8 cobblestone sections. The big thing to pay attention to is with 80 kilometers to go, though, because that's when the bergs and the cobblestones get a little more compact together, so you get less rest and less intervals of rest in between those climbs and cobbles. But once we get into 80 kilometers to go, you got about 3 together. Then you get a 10 kilometer section, 10, 12 kilometer section of rest on the road. Rest, if you're in the back, you're trying to close that gap. It's not much of a rest. But you got to think about that as a director sportif, that with the street sections, the long 10 kilometer sections in between successions of climbs and bergs, those are where teams can come back together. So if you're a director sportif, you're thinking and you're telling your teammates, everybody has to be focused with 80 kilometers to go. Certainly a big team like Visma-Lease bike, you never lose focus from kilometer 0 to the finish, but 80 kilometers to go, there's no room for mistakes. So if you're Visma-Lease bike, after you look at Alpecin de Koenig and you say Jasper Philipsen team should want a sprint for Jasper, so they'll help control things. So if you're near that team and they're not in the break, you know Alpecin de Koenig would be a team that would ride the front. But when you start looking at other teams like Q36.5, how are we mentioning Q36.5 at the opening biggest one-day race of the 25 season at Omloop? Well, that's because Tom Pidcock's been winning. He won 2 stages at Alula, won the general classification, and then won a stage down at Andalusia, so he clearly has some form. The British rider's going to be 100% motive for Q36.5, and his teammates will be too. But the upside, if you're Visma-Lease bike and you look over at Q36.5, you know they can only ride for one guy. They have Tom Pidcock. That is their ace card. That is the only card they have. They have no joker cards. If you look over at Visma-Lease bike, the director sportif says, we have Jorgensen. We have my man Victor Campenaerts there. We have Thies Benoot. But if I'm the director sportif, I'm basing everything around Wout van Aert, the big guy, until he tells me something different in the race. If he said he had a bad training days since Algarve finished, I don't care. I need to know right in the race exactly how he feels once we get into race pace. And I believe, as we've seen interviews from Wout van Aert, where he says he was starting to feel the good sensations at Algarve, so he should start coming good for these classics. So I'm building everything around Wout van Aert. I don't want Jorgensen in the early move. I don't want Victor Campenaerts in the early move, and I don't want Tiesj Benoot in the early move, because those are your strongest helpers to wrap around Wout van Aert when you get under 80 kilometers to go. If you have those three, you can decide what's going to happen at the end of the race. If Wout says he still feels good with 80 kilometers to go, the plan is super easy. You want the racing to start to get hard at 80 kilometers to go, or certainly at 55 kilometers to go, when the bergs and the cobbles all compact together all the way into the last 10 kilometers to go of Omloop, and then you want it to go full gas through those sections with 55 kilometers to go as hard as you can, and that's what Jorgensen, that's what my man Victor Campenaerts and Tiesj Benoot can do. Now, will they play that tactic? Probably not. Most of the time, Visma-Lease bike play a tactic of always putting guys into the break and trying to win from the break. I don't know why, when you have a rider like Wout van Aert, especially if he says he's 100% on form, why you would use that tactic, but that's one that they might employ, not one that I would employ unless Wout says he doesn't have the legs. But keep in mind, with Q36.5 and Alpecin de Koenig all wanting to get deeper into the race, those two teams will help out certainly 100% with Visma-Lease bike. Now, the one thing about Q36.5 and Wout van Aert is that they don't want to come to the finish with one Jasper Philipsen, one of the fastest sprinters in the world. They would prefer to get rid of one Arnaud Delis from Lotto Destiny too, because he has a lot of speed, but they're probably more worried about Jasper Philipsen than Arnaud Delis. Either way, though, once we start getting under 55 kilometers to go, I can guarantee you that if Visma-Lease bike don't have a rider in the front brake, and if I was calling the shots, they would still be in the group around Wout van Aert if he's feeling good. I would be drilling it, and then you look over at Tom Pidcock if you're Wout van Aert, and you know Tom Pidcock wants the same scenario that Wout does. They want to go up the road with 55 kilometers to go, if not 80, and they want to make the racing as hard as they can so that they can get rid of one Jasper Philipsen and hopefully Arnaud Delis. Those are your four favorites in this race. There's no doubt about it, because Jasper Philipsen, as I said, he's fast. Delis already won. Tom Pidcock's already won. And Wout van Aert, well, he hasn't won, but you know he might have won the individual time trial stage at Algarve if he didn't change bikes. So those guys are on form. But when you're looking at Tom Pidcock and your Visma-Lease bike, the Director Sportif, you're telling Wout, do not let Tom Pidcock out of your sight, because we know he is on good form. If there is a split of 10, 15 of the big favorites there, and you got a bunch of Lidl Trek riders in there, you know they're going to be attacking left and right, because Vasek wants to get rid of Wout van Aert. They don't want to go to the line with a sprinter like Jasper Philipsen either, so they're going to be 100% aggressive with Jasper Stuyvens and Vasek for sure. But if you're Wout van Aert, as long as you keep Tom Pidcock near you in that group of 10 or 15, if it does split from the aggressive riding with 55 kilometers to go, as long as you have Tom Pidcock near you, guess what? Well, you have a lot of power. Tom Pidcock has the kind of form to go pull for Wout van Aert at Omloop Het Nieuwsblad. I believe anyways. Looking at his form at the Lula Tour and Andalusia's victory on stage 2, it shows that Tom Pidcock has really good form, and he's the one guy that you know for sure, if you're Wout van Aert, that if you're in a 15-rider group and the non-favorites split away from you on tactical attacks that get up the road with hesitations in the back, you know Tom Pidcock's not afraid to work with Wout van Aert. So if you go to the line with Tom Pidcock and Wout van Aert together, Wout van Aert has the bigger odds of winning the sprint for sure. But Tom Pidcock likes the idea of working with Wout van Aert, because he knows that with that prediction, they can get deep into the climb, and by the time they get to the Muir or they get to the Bosberg, then we know for sure that Tom Pidcock is going to be trying to drop Wout van Aert so that he can make it to the finish without having to sprint against Wout van Aert. But as I said, there's a lot of ifs, ands, or buts, because no one knows exactly what everybody's form is when you start looking over there, and Jorgensen has not raced yet in the 25 season. Why you want to come to Omloop and start your first day of racing is beyond me. I'd start it somewhere else before I go to the Classics. But this is his first race, and my man Victor Campenaerts' first race here for Visma-Lease bike too. So if I'm the Director Sportif again for Visma-Lease bike, I'm playing Wout van Aert 100%. But let's say Wout van Aert comes into 100 kilometers to go and he says, Coach, I don't have the legs. I can't do it. He's telling his teammates he doesn't feel 100%. Then my next guy, without knowing what their form is, but just going off of their character of riding in the years past, because again, they have not raced, Victor Campenaerts and Jorgensen. But I like Victor Campenaerts in the breakaway because for sure he has the speed to win sprints. We've seen him win Giro d'Italia stages and 2-up sprints. We've seen him win Tour de France stages against sprints where he won there in small breakaways. So if I got to pick a guy from Visma-Lease bike to be in the early break or the break that's going to the line with under 80 kilometers to go, I want it to be Victor Campenaerts because Thies Benoot does not have finishing speed and Jorgensen does not have finishing speed either. But Victor Campenaerts does have enough speed to be able to beat other fast guys if they come to the line. So Visma-Lease bike have to make the plan evolving all the time, but always starting with Wout van Aert as the key figure, and then depending on how he feels, that decides how the rest of the guys race. Because if he says, I feel good, it's tactic 101, guys. Don't break the #1 rule on the butterfly effect and beyond the coverage. Stay with the #1 rider in the race. Put your team around him. Make the racing hard with 80 kilometers to go. With 55 kilometers to go, Jorgensen, Victor Campenaerts, Thies Benoot continue the pace as fast as it possibly can be. And then the big guy, Wout van Aert, keeps an eye on Tom Pidcock until he throws in the first attacks. He follows with Tom Pidcock. He either goes to the line with Tom Pidcock or he drops him close to the finish and he solos for Visma-Lease bikes Wout van Aert to take his first classic win of the 25 season. Easier said than done, right? Well, that's why we got to watch tomorrow's race, because one thing's for certain, it's the unknown factor in tomorrow's Saturday race at Omloop, where anything can happen, but everything has to be on a changing plan all the time. Of course, unless you're Tom Pidcock, you don't have the teammates to do it, so you got to keep your team together. You got to have them get you deep into the race, and then Tom Pidcock has to get rid of Wout van Aert at some point in time, because he has beaten him in a sprint. But can he beat him in a sprint at Omloop Het Nieuwsblad? I don't know if I'd put those odds in my favor, but tomorrow's race is going to be exciting, so like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the butterfly effect for tomorrow's Saturday race at Omloop.